Good morning, geography class. Welcome to the next to the last week of school. Did you think you were going to make it this far? I know I was concerned. Not that I didn't believe we could make it, it's just that I didn't think we'd have to go this far with online learning. But we've learned a lot, we've come a long way. And today we're going to start our last country that we will cover this year, and that is New Zealand. We do have a Zoom meeting tomorrow to discuss our exam, and then we have just a few activities later in this week to help us review for that. Okay, we might finish New Zealand today. On the lesson plans, it says that we have 2 days to do New Zealand, and we might need them both, but we'll see how far we can get today. Okay. All right, so New Zealand, islands off, they look like they're just off the coast of Australia, but they are really 1,200 miles away, which means that's like the distance from Atlanta to Denver, okay? So it'd be like flying from here to Denver to get from Australia to New Zealand. It's a beautiful island, very, very beautiful countryside. New Zealand is the home of a lot of movies that are filmed because of their beautiful countryside. It's also, of course, the home of a lot of unusual animals. The extinct moa bird was there. The moa bird was a flightless bird that grew up to 12 feet tall and weighed up to 500 pounds. Huge. It is also currently the home of the kiwi bird. Kiwi is also a flightless bird, but it's about the size of a chicken. Really, really cute. There's a picture of one in your book on page 559. But Australia is their nearest neighbor at 1,200 miles to the west across the Tasman Sea. Let's talk a little bit about where they came from and how the islands were settled. The Maori people were the first to settle Australia. They are from Polynesia, which are the islands to the north and west of New Zealand. From many different countries. Where specifically they came from, we don't know. We do know that they arrived on warships that were hollowed out tree trunks. But they were the first humans on the island of New Zealand, and that was, of course, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They proved to be a difficult challenge when Europeans arrived. Abel Tasman, who had founded some of the islands of Australia, arrived also in New Zealand in around 1642. And when he arrived there, the Maori people actually murdered several of his crewmen, and he ended up having to leave. So the island was not settled by Tasman. Captain James Cook will come after him, and James Cook will be able to establish a working relationship with the Maori people. So the first European settlers that really came and stayed on the island, though, were convicts who had escaped from Australia. Because remember, Australia was a prison colony. And also there were other people who were like deserters from British ships who came and settled on the island as well. So they didn't always get along with the Maori people. But in 1840, okay, so let me go back. The English traders brought rum and guns and traded those with the Maori people in exchange for flax. And flax is a fiber that they used to make ropes. So the people needed it for shipping or for whatever, and the Maori had it, so they changed off. And of course, adding alcohol and guns into the mix of a group of people who already don't get along is not a wise idea. So fighting began between the Maori and the Maori fighting each other, as well as the Maori and the white settlers fighting each other. So finally, the British settlers that were in the area asked the British monarch to come in and settle the area and establish a government and take over so that they would stop fighting. And the British government did that. And in 1840, a group of the Maori chiefs finally signed a treaty called the Treaty of Waitangi, and where they recognized the British monarch as their sovereign, as their leader. And in exchange, they agreed that they owned all the land, the Maori did. And if they wanted to sell any land, they would only sell it to the British monarch. And that worked great for a little while until other settlers arrived, and other settlers bought land directly from the Maori instead of buying it from the British Crown. And then that started all kinds of uprisings and things like that. So at New Zealand's request, Great Britain finally granted the colony dominion status in 1907, which means it is part of Great Britain. They recognize the British monarch as their queen at this point, but they have their own authority, their own government, which is a parliament that has legislative authority on the island. Okay, the government, of course, is similar to those who make up other independent nations like Canada, Ireland, Scotland, those that are also part of the British Commonwealth. Beautiful pictures, aren't they? They have two main islands, and then there's several smaller islands on the country, but there's North Island and South Island. Really easy to remember. The North Island on the north side, the South Island on the south side, okay? We're going to talk about North Island first. It's slightly smaller than South Island, but most of the people in New Zealand live on North Island. It's home to twice as many people as South Island. Auckland here is their largest city, the chief seaport. It has a really nice deep port. Nearly 1.4 million people live there, making it, this city of Atlanta has like 6 million. So that kind of gives you an idea of how much smaller it is. But New Zealand is on the Ring of Fire, the Pacific Ring of Fire. And I think you've probably studied this in science class before. The Ring of Fire is, of course, all the way around the Pacific Ocean, and it's countries, land masses where there's active volcanoes. And there are active volcanoes in New Zealand. In fact, they generate some electricity as well as other activities that they can do because of that volcanic activity on the island. They have geothermal activity, meaning there's heat underground. Several of the world's geothermal electrical plants are located here in New Zealand. It's very cheap, easy power to generate. And it's very, very efficient as well as environmentally friendly. And they do it in a very nice way. What they do is they recycle the water. They're taking water out of the ground and using it to create steam, to build steam and produce electricity. But then they put that water back underground so that they can do it again in a cyclical fashion. So it really works out really well for them. Okay, Wellington is the capital. It's the largest city. And then there are ferries and hydrofoils here at Wellington that transport people across the Cook Strait to get from North Island to South Island. I'm trying to make sure I've told you everything I wanted to tell you. More Polynesian people live in New Zealand than live in Polynesia, I believe. It is the largest population of Polynesians in the world. And many of them have come to New Zealand because of their way of life. They were a socialist country. They were running very much a welfare state. And years ago in the mid-1980s, they discovered that this isn't working. So they revamped their government and freed it from socialism, sold enterprises back to private sector, and they have become one of the best economies in the world today. Very efficient, very thorough in their work. It's just been great. And of course, they are one of the leading exporters in the world of beef and mutton. Mutton is sheep, okay? So they export, they make enough food that they export food, even though they're just a tiny island country. Okay, so South Island is known for its country atmosphere, much more relaxed, laid back. It's not as industrial as North Island. It even has snow-capped mountains. Mount Cook here is New Zealand's highest mountain. They are the world's largest exporter of kiwi. Yes, because remember the kiwi bird, and they are called kiwis. The people of New Zealand are often called kiwis. Um, they have on the South Island, they have an area that is all mountainous and then an area that's plain. So they have the Southern Alps and then the Canterbury Plains, which are very dry because the west wind comes off of the Pacific Ocean, and all the rain is dumped in the mountains, and the Canterbury Plains are fairly dry. And then the Christchurch is the largest city on the South Island. Years ago, they introduced possums to the island to hopefully help with maybe a wild food supply and to harvest their furs. But it got to the point that they had so many possums on the island that they became a menace to the native plants and animals. So during the 1980s, the opossum population reached over 60 million possums. I can't stand possums. They're so gross. All right. So by 2009, the population had been reduced through various control measures, and now they have 30 million possums on the island. So they've cut it in half. Yuck. Okay. Let me see. I think that's it. You have finished New Zealand, so there will be no video tomorrow, but there will be a Zoom meeting tomorrow to discuss your final exam. Okay. So make sure you tune in for that and take part in that. If you don't have the ability to do that, if it's at a time that's not convenient for your family, then we will record it and you'll be able to watch that afterwards. Okay. If you have any questions in the meantime, send them to me. I'm happy to help, and I will look forward to seeing you again soon. Have a good day.